Hey, this is John Bartlett again from Brentwood Growth. We've got another episode of our podcast, Sale or Scale, and I'm pleased to have with me Max Mortimer and West Hubbard from Basement Kings. Hey guys, how you doing?
Good, John. We're very glad to be on today.
Yeah, and where are you guys calling from?
I'm actually out of Durham, North Carolina.
And I am in New York.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. And so, I mean, tell me briefly about y'all's background and how the two of you connected and how the firm sort of came together.
Absolutely. So I spent a lot of my career over in the marketing, lead gen, leading sales teams, both in software and then executing on residential services lead gen, and was working for a company that owned a gutter business. Never thought I would get into the kind of resi services construction side, and really enjoyed it. So helped flip that company from being unprofitable to profitable. And that led to some conversations with Max last year, who's done a lot of much larger and much more impressive companies in a small local gutter business. But we realized there was a lot of opportunity in the foundation repair, basement waterproofing, polyurethane injection, concrete, just a lot in that space. And so we looped up. We also have a third operating partner who was my roommate at MIT, who knows a lot about the space, has run a business with his father for 15 years, and kind of burnt the ships and dove fully into seeing what we could do to build a platform of like-minded owners and operators in this space.
Well, that's great, Max. Max, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and so taking a step back, Wes is someone who Wes and I've known each other for the past 25 years. We both grew up together, went to grade school together. So he's someone I've known for vast majority of my life. I know his family well, his high integrity, high moral compass guy. Like building a business is like getting into a marriage with someone.
It is.
And so you really have to know who you are looking to build this partnership with. And so as I and my career history is more traditional finance and banking and private equity for the past 10 years, all based in New York. And as I look to build my own, hang my own shingle, needed a partner and someone with operating experience. And then it's very important to find someone with a very complementary skill set to my own, and someone that I know and can trust with my life. And that's West.
Well, that's great. So how long have you guys been at this now?
So initial conversation started, just about May or so of last year, when both of us were employed, at different firms, and then got serious over the past summer, and then both of us left our respective jobs and went full force.
Here we are, man. Here we are.
Into building Basement Kings USA.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Now I find myself on commercial job sites, first thing in the morning. I love it. Very different than what you would have gotten from me from where I would be in a year ago.
Life is a journey, isn't it? So what is, talk a bit more about the specific sectors that you're looking for, and what is it within those sectors that make those interesting for you guys?
Yeah, so we're looking for mid-sized, growing foundation repair and basement waterproofing companies across the Sun Belt. We are really looking for strong operators. Part of our platform thesis is wanting people that want to stay on, certainly for a few years and run the business, be part of the platform. So we want like-minded owners that are willing to contribute to a platform and ownership group and roll as part of the platform. And then the reason we picked the Sun Belt, it's not to say there aren't other regions that need this work and you see this work, but you have traditionally seen in that area lower quality building in areas that have soils that have issues with expansion, and you see more and more so today periods of flooding, which cause that expansion, drought, which causes it to contract,
Mhm.
You are seeing that variability of kind of extreme weather really impact this region. And so we know that if we can find good operators with quality teams, this is going to be work that is more and more done. And conveniently, that's now paired with home prices historically growing in this region as to how they did in the past. So that's something we're super excited about. Max, anything I missed there?
No, I think that it's a lot of main points. The only thing I would add is, from technical characteristics, looking for like a size and scale and durability, of a business. So, a company that has hit an inflection point of, let's say, $7 to $12 million of revenue, we think is, the size where, it get interesting for us. That something at that scale, the owners have, invested in the, systems and infrastructure and people and processes and systems in order to kind of be able to operate, at that level. And that's what maybe has topped out kind of at that level and needs help to get to, that new level. And so that's where we, generally hunt.
So, in terms of the size of the company, sort of in the $10 to $12 million revenue range, is that about right?
Spot on.
Yeah.
Definitely, we'll look at something a bit smaller than that, and look at something bigger than that. But these are companies that are just, again, poised to have a little bit of a bigger operational team.
Yeah.
Generally, you have 1 to 2 great operators that have built this, but these companies need 5. And so when you go to implement a quality marketing plan,
Right.
you go to implement a new CRM, you want to improve your production, crew efficiency, truck layout, get some, go talk to suppliers and figure out a way in which you're able to, get better purchasing power by ordering by the truckload. Those are things that wind up being tough because, with 1 to 2 operators, you're on the job sites, you're fixing issues all day. And those are the projects that, the next summer is going to be slow. We'll do it then. Next summer's not slow because you're a high growth operator, and they just fall off to the next year.
Is there
Yeah.
anything from a revenue mix standpoint that you pay particular attention to?
I would say, by and large, you don't want a lot of customer concentration. I mean, within residential services, like that really isn't a big factor. We aren't a subcontractor to, one large construction company. Our customers are generally, the homeowner, for all intents and purposes. And if there are, the nature of foundation repair, basement waterproofing is generally one time in nature. So there aren't, recurring or reoccurring revenue streams, but if we think that there is the ability to, build that in, whether it's, annual checkups or, maintenance contracts for a dehumidifier or sump pump or something like that. But by and large, the nature of these services is, one time in nature, and that's totally fine.
What sort of infrastructure do you feel like the business needs to have initially, and then where potentially are you looking to add to that internal infrastructure that they have?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that we're going to need in order to do our due diligence is appropriate accounting. It's not to say there isn't going to be gaps, things we have to all get comfortable with together, understanding of how the business has operated in the past. I think one of the things that most sellers we talk to get a little nervous on. Oh, well, I sometimes fill up my truck, on the company card. Like, that's very standard for businesses.
Right.
If not well more than filling up gas in the truck of this size, from quality people, from quality operators. That I think is the core. We do like when we see that there's a team that can absolutely start working in what should be, in my opinion, a more efficient process, but with technology instead of something that's currently done on paper, whether that's inventory management, whether that's your CRM. And so, I think we like to see human beings and team members that are eager and excited to implement technology, but just haven't had the time or the expertise in order to do so. I've had the quote unquote joy of implementing 5 CRMs, majority of which have been Salesforce ground up.
Yep.
It's hard, and it's just when you roll these new systems out, you got to do them right. Luckily, I eventually learned best to rip the Band-Aid and do it completely, but make sure you're making it, very straightforward and simple, and not having 600 new modules that you roll out because some accountant 5 departments over said, I need this checkbox here. And someone has to, say yes or no every single time. Because let me tell you, the sales guys and production guys aren't going to love that. So an openness to technology is great. The more we see that there's been some attempt to adopt, even if not particularly well implemented, I think it shows that. But some of the key ones are obviously, we need to make sure we can, we're not rebuilding their books from day one. That's something there's an expectation the company has done.
When you look at this from the seller's perspective, from the owner's perspective, as you're buying businesses and as you're partnering with sellers and as you're talking to potential sellers, give me an idea what's the average age of the seller, sort of where are they in life, and what's the motivation behind them wanting to have a conversation with guys like you?
We're seeing that in a wider range than we might have expected. So it's definitely a little bit of a bell curve. But the center of that is usually around someone who's late 50s, early 60s. They want to be out in 5 to 10 years. But they want the legacy of their business to continue. They want to make sure that. And they do understand. I mean, the number of articles, I'm sure many people, if you're watching this, you've read it, of plumbing, HVAC, roofing, all these platforms that have been built where by being part of a platform for a handful of years, you get a huge second bite of the apple, even if you only roll 10% of your company's value that you hold on to as part of that platform. So a lot of them want that. And for sometimes I would say we have seen a little bit more on the older side of the spectrum, but more, if anything, on the younger side. Just some guys who are ambitious, eager. They're hitting that, $10 million or so where they go, oof, this is really hard for me to do alone. And that's where being part of a platform has a lot of value.
Yeah, completely. Just to add to that, I mean, there's, it's from my perspective, it's a different skill set to get from a $0 to $5 million revenue business, zero to one person, an entrepreneur who's good at the blocking and tackling, or just like getting out there and being a foreman on his own crews, versus the $5 to $10 million revenue companies where you have to, in order to achieve that scale, you have to invest in the systems, processes, people, and be able to work on the business, not in the business. You have to remove yourself from being the key decision maker of every single thing that every single decision that the company makes, to being able to delegate and make yourself a more scalable leader. And then it's also a different type of person or personality that generally is needed to go from the 10 million of revenue to 20 million or 50 million. Right. And a lot of these individuals that we're meeting with, they're first time founders, or this is the first time that they're going through a process like this, or built a business of that size and scale. So and it's tough. And so we have the pattern recognition of having seen this movie before and having helped founders, owners, operators both transact, but also build scaled operations. And it takes a village. No easy task, but looking for ambitious operators who want to stay on, but just need help to get to the next level.
Let's talk about deal structure. Given what the owner's motivation is and what they're trying to accomplish in the short term and in the medium term and in the long term, as you're talking to these owners and as you're trying to understand better what their objectives are, and you're trying to structure a transaction to meet their objectives and your objectives also, how are you structuring the deal in terms of the cash component, in terms of the earnout component, in terms of the rollover equity component? How is that being structured? And sometimes this whole concept of rollover equity, it's a difficult concept for folks to wrap their head around. And so if you could talk a little bit about the general deal structure, and then sort of dive in more deeply in terms of what that rollover equity looks like.
Happy to. So generally, there are three different components to our general, proposed transaction structure. As you noted, it's the cash component, upfront cash paid at closing, a seller note, or some sort of deferred compensation, and then rollover equity. Generally, it is of the total consideration. It'll be roughly 10% of total consideration is rollover equity. So that is equity that is on a tax deferred basis being invested into the holding company that will own 100% of the entity that's acquiring the assets of the company. And then the deferred consideration or the seller note, is generally 50% of the total consideration, and then cash up front will be the balance. So roughly 40%.
Right. Okay.
And of course, we advise all the sellers to get their tax advice from their own accountants. And
I understand.
Make sure they're doing what's best for them.
The tax advice that is exactly what they pay for right now, right? Yeah. So, I mean, hypothetically, let's say it's a $10 million transaction, and you've got the cash piece, and you've got the note piece, and you've got 10% of over equity. That's $1 million that they're rolling over into the holding company. From a seller's perspective, that $1 million that they're rolling over, what should they expect to receive in that second bite of the apple, so to speak, from that $1 million investment, and what's the timeline that they should expect to see the return from that?
Yeah, particularly as we are, at the beginning of our journey, the people who we partner with that roll, their equity into our platform, we think that there is potential to, 5x that money over the next, let's say 5 years.
Right.
And, that is because of, the velocity of how we're looking to, acquire other companies and grow and scale the business. And the multiple arbitrage that the overall platform should be able to get to, go from a $10 million revenue business to, $100 or $150 million revenue business. The way that those, the difference between, how a $10 million company is valued in the market versus a, $150 million is very different. And so, by, investing alongside, us, and being aligned on, growing and building that platform, there is, a risk, but, that risk is compensated by, potential for outsized returns, which in our mind is, that 3 to 5 times of what the initial investment is.
And I think that's where a lot of these operators are counting on Max and I to do, our job. And yes, plan to add a lot of value for myself, marketing, sales, and technology operations. But, the value of that role is huge. And we'll ask for their help in that. A lot of these people know others in the industry in different states. And, if they're a great foundation repair operator, they might know a great waterproofing company. Those two tend to work in hand. I talked to a drainage company this morning. And so that's where, and a lot of the people we talk to, it sometimes takes a conversation or two, which I get. It's complicated, but, wait a second. If I, pull in my buddy who does the same amount of, if I do 10 million in revenue, they do 10 million in revenue, I add them to the platform. My equity, in the platform just actually went up overnight because you get a little more of value on the multiple. It's like, yeah, and that's the piece where, you pull these in when you get purchased at a 5x multiple, and then really by having these 10 companies working together, all of a sudden you're at a 10 or 12x multiple. Really, very quickly you have taken your $1 million and made it more than double as valuable overnight.
So going back to the $10 million example that I used just a moment ago, so it the valuation might be 10 million. There might be 5 million to that in cash. There might be a note for another 3 to 4 million, 5 million, whatever the number is, and then that $1 million that they're rolling or leaving in the business in 5 years, that could be worth another 3 to 5 million on top of the note proceeds and the cash proceeds. And so when they look at,
if not more, it can
Yeah.
really be a big deal.
Yeah. So that second bite of the apple, so to speak, is very, very meaningful. And so, following that thread a moment, if that second bite is so meaningful as sellers are looking at potential guys like you to partner with, it's so important that they pick the right partner with the right platform, with the right strategy. And so if a seller's thinking about selling his business and he's looking at your offer, and he might have a couple of other offers that he's considering also, what is it that you guys are presenting to him in order to help him understand why you might be the right partner for him?
I can take that. I think that when we look at this, so much of it again is getting in the room with people, shaking hands, and getting a comfort of, they are going to be working with someone they can trust.
Right.
As Max said at the beginning, trust is paramount between us. Trust is paramount with the operators. In this case, we are, and on our platform, this is the sole focus of the platform. I think when you talk to some other larger PE firms, the track record might be a little different, but you are one and part of a whole portfolio. And if it's not going perfectly, there might be, a need for the returns for their firm to focus elsewhere. On our side, that's not the case. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, by being solely focused here, deploying the same amount of capital as these companies, and really having I think a eager, high quality team with very solid experience. It's not uncommon to have people with less experience. The firm might have more experience, but the people tasked to some of these platforms might not. We think we can stand out, not only be a great partner that they can trust for the operator, but we'll have more skin in the game and more desire to make sure that this is as a sole focus, this is successful for all parties.
Awesome. So let's continue through the process. So you started the conversations, you've made an offer, you've structured the deal in the offer. The seller feels like you're a good fit for them. You feel like they're a good fit for you. Everyone joins hands and the LOI is accepted at that point. From the time that the LOI is accepted, what are the next steps in the process that need to be completed before the deal's closed?
Yeah, that's the painful part. We're doing it right now, actually, and you wind up having a tricky balance depending on the firm of, okay, who do we potentially need to pull in? If the accountant's in-house, if the insurance is handled by the office manager, there's documentation that's needed for due diligence on the financial side, on the accountant, on the insurance side, on the production side. I need to go see some job sites, and that's where you then get that tricky. Okay, we don't want our employees to know in case something comes up that we decide we didn't want to go forward here, and now we look weird. Our employees are uncertain. On the flip side, the more information that's provided, the less painful the diligence is, and that diligence has to be done. You're talking about $5+ million transacting hands in a single transaction. You can't not do that. And so, it is a few weeks of pulling a lot of documents together. And then on our side, engaging, high quality third party providers that are then going to review that. And they're going to come back to you as an owner they're going to ask you, hey, I need you to explain this, and you're going to have to sit there and go through that all. So I would actually say, post LOI diligence is the most painful, and then that obviously, and we tend to parallel track ours when we can, but that results in all of that winding up in a legal agreement that will take a few turns of, a document to go through prior to doing the close.
And how long does that process usually take from when the LOI is accepted until when the deal actually closes?
Yeah, I would say the typical range is 60 to 120 days.
Right.
Generally 90 is what we see in the market. And but for this deal that we're currently working on, we're targeting a 2-month sign and close period.
Right. You had mentioned employees a moment ago, and obviously having the conversation with the employees at the appropriate time is an important part of the process. What have you seen in terms of what owners have done and when the right time is to have that conversation with the employees? And do you do it all at once, or are you bringing different groups of employees in terms of what their position in the leadership team is in that process?
Ideally, all at once. Again, for a lot of these companies, yes, you do have a head of production, a head of the yard, generally a head of the office, but these are family companies. These are friends that have worked together for 25 years. You tell 3-4 people, everyone's going to find out, and that's not a knock on anyone individually. That's just how the world works. And so, ideally, you're holding off on. We agree that you should involve as few people as possible. And then generally, it also makes it really easy. I mean, we are not getting rid of people day one. We are not massively overhauling your systems, your branding, how you do your business, how you do your job on day one. And obviously, the biggest question is, for most people, do I still have a job? And is my pay still the same? And are my benefits still the same? And so it's much easier when basically you can on day one say, hey guys, we're now involved in the ownership structure. We're all partners. The guys you worked with are still here. And let's get back to work. Now things change. We look forward to helping. So, right. That makes it, that alleviates a lot of the concern.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is we're naturally growth-oriented investors. We're looking to partner with high quality management team and then help them grow their business. We aren't restructuring or turnaround investors or distressed investors. And so we are looking to hire more people onto the platform to maximize like the efficiency of like each person in their job and so looking to grow teams as opposed to shrink them. So it's generally an easy conversation. We're excited to hop on board. We're committing 110% of our time, effort, and energy into helping this company grow and scale. And from it can be seen as like a shot of adrenaline into the lifeblood, and everyone excited about positive change.
Let me flip it back over to the owner for a moment. So many of these guys, they started this business years ago, or they bought this business years ago, and they wanted their independence, and they wanted their freedom, and they wanted to be able to call their own shots. And now they've got a partner that owns majority interest in the business. And so how have you seen that sellers have gotten comfortable with sort of that change, and what looks different in their life the day after the deal closes?
Yeah, I think emotionally that's the most difficult thing, and a lot of these businesses are like a child to the owner, and so you need someone that has accepted that their go forward role may change, and in our case it just there's a fortunate timing where the existing owner was late 60s. He's looking to be partially involved in the company, but, step back from a full-time, management role. And so, he is staying on as a consultant. He's super plugged into the industry and, knows many other, owners of similar firms. And so we'll still be involved and is, the number one cheerleader for the company, but he also didn't want to do all the daily blocking and tackling. And, that's required to, manage a, 30-person business. And so, he wanted to step back and needed a partner to fill that void. And so, that's where it was a very, mutually beneficial, timeline and proposed plan.
So in a way, this is an opportunity for the owner, who's now the seller, to sort of hit the reset button and create a new job description with you guys in terms of what his role and responsibilities are going to be, and maybe get some stuff off his plate that he has not enjoyed doing for a while and doesn't feel like he's very good at, maybe. And it allows him to maybe focus on some of the areas of the business that he can bring the most value to.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, there's so much middle and back office operations that go into just, maintaining, business of that size that no one enjoys doing. So, if we can take that off your plate, or the owner's plate, so take away the, the finance, the accounting, the, HR, payroll, like, accounts receivable, inventory management, all of that.
All the stuff.
So they can just focus on, hiring, great individuals and making customers happy, which is, probably why they got into, doing what they're doing in the first place. It's a win-win.
That's awesome.
John, just a heads up. I got to actually go talk to some lawyers here in a second, so I might need Max to wrap it up to continue for me here. But
okay, cool. So if someone's thinking about beginning this process, what are some things that you would encourage them to think about that maybe they've not thought about prior, that they need to be prepared for to begin this journey?
Yeah, I think the first thing to what you were saying, in our last point, just digesting that, your role may change, that, you are naturally giving up control of your company, that you are, entering, allowing people, strangers that you don't know right now into the business. There's, a lot of emotional, it's an emotional process and a lot to digest and get comfortable with. And so having that come to Jesus moment, in the beginning and committing to, either, I want to, sell my company, wash my hands and walk away and just, not be involved anymore, or, or accept that, you're, day to day, running and managing your company will change. The other thing is it depends, how far out you plan to enter into a transaction, but, just making sure that, you have started thinking about, okay, delegation and making sure the right, people are in the right spots, or, you're, it's a growing business. You want to make sure you're selling it at the most favorable timing, to get the highest valuation, from the bidders. It makes sense to, start having conversations with someone like yourself or a banker or a broker, just to, start asking for advice of, okay, how do I, best position my, company for success, and have those conversations earlier.
Yeah, we actually find that a lot of folks that we're talking to, they're not ready to have the conversation yet, or they know the business is not ready to have this conversation yet, but they're thinking 2 years out, they're thinking 5 years out, and they want to be sure that they know the value of the business, they know what it is that they're trying to achieve, and they're beginning to put a roadmap in place to build the value of the business to where they need for it to be, and guys like you need for it to be, and they got the infrastructure in place where the foundation is there to make it attractive for guys like you. So even if you don't have a $10 million business, you might have a $2 million business today. It's important to begin this journey and understand over the next 2, 5 years, 7 years, whatever the timeline is, what exactly it is that you need to be building in order to achieve what that objective is at some point down the road.
Yeah, and I'll talk to friends who have done something similar, and what were the biggest mistakes that they made, or what were the biggest surprises that they didn't expect to come about through this process. I I will have a conversation with anyone, and I learn something from every conversation as well, and so
100%.
just get out there, sooner rather than later. Things always take longer than you think they will.
Right.
And, you also, the future is always unknown. So you don't, who knows, what will happen to the economy or to, your particular market or, something in the geography that you're in. So, it doesn't hurt to, start having these conversations and testing the water and, just that I think, having as much information as possible, sets you up, for success.
Well, that's great. That's great. And this has been a super conversation and so much good information, and we appreciate your time. So if someone wants to reach out to you guys directly, Max, what's the easiest way for them to find you?
Yeah, email is generally best. My email address is max@basementkingsusa.com. I can send it to you in an email, John. And yeah, thank you very much for this conversation.
Yeah, and we'll put the contact details in the show notes. And if anyone wants to reach out to you guys directly, they can.
Absolutely. And West's email address is west@basementkingsusa.
We'll put them both in there.
You can find us easily.
Yep. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been very valuable, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, John.
Okay, dude, thank you. Cheers.
Bye.